Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. Welcome to a very interesting session we're looking to have today. This is a webinar being hosted by IBS Intelligence in partnership with Infosys Finacle. And the topic we have today is quite interesting. It is about scaling corporate banking digitization with cloud. So you could ask for corporate banking discussions here, and we will be talking a fair bit on digitization and cloud and how we scale. We do have a very interesting panel today, and without much ado, if I can quickly introduce my fellow panelists and just welcome them here. We have with us Mr. Raju Buddhiraju, who is the Executive General Manager at Commercial Bank. He's the Chief of Wholesale Banking. Raju comes with many years of experience with having worked across geographies. We just talking about his experience when he started in India, but he spent a lot of time in the European market and a fair bit of his last couple of decades in GCC across markets, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and now Qatar. Raju, welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
We also have with us the Chief Wholesale Banking Officer, Mr. Manish Dameja, Chief Wholesale Banking Officer at Sohar International, Oman. Manish comes with a lot of experience, having seen corporate banking across markets, not just in the GCC, but prior to this, with markets including Asia, South Asia, India, and Africa, many years, having seen how corporate banking has evolved over a period of time and how things are moving ahead. Manish, we are looking forward to having some very interesting insights from you today. Please welcome on.
Thanks, Ram. Pleasure to be here.
My other fellow panelists here, Rajshekhara Maya, we call him Maya. Perhaps one of the very few who actually are part of the team that has been with Infosys Finacle from its days of inception. Maya and I go back for more than 20 years. He actually heads the business consulting at Finacle Infosys, but he has worn many hats. He actually tracks what's happening as banking practices, which then gets embedded in the Finacle product. And in the last count we had was about 50 plus countries that he actually keeps track of. So Maya, we're going to have a bit of that experience sharing today at the panel. So welcome again on board here.
Thank you, Ram. Hi, Manish and Raju. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello. If I may, just share with everyone the structure of today's webinar. We would be having a short presentation from Maya and his thoughts on what he's been observing and seeing around the world. Following which, we're going to have a very interesting discussion with both Raju and Manish. Following which, we'll open up the questions for the audience. But in the meanwhile, you're more than welcome to post your questions. You will find there's a Q&A button there. You could post your questions here, and if we find there's an opportunity to pose it to the panelists, I'll be happy to do that. Just to introduce myself before I jump into the panel, my name is Ram. I'm a senior partner with Cedar, the parent firm of IBS Intelligence, the host of today's webinar. Before we jump into Maya, if I may actually have our participants run a small poll. We will be having a few questions for you, in the audience. It's interesting to see what your perspectives are on a few things that we may find useful to also talk about in the panel today. So let me start with a small question, which is, if you can see the poll has been launched. I'm assuming you can see can you see this, Maya? Are you able to see the screen? Okay.
Yep.
So there you are. What would be the biggest focus area for corporate banking digitization? Is it client onboarding? Is it risk and analytics? Is it transaction banking, or is it payments? We aren't saying that any of these are unimportant, nor are we saying that it is one over the other. We're just asking what is the biggest focus in your view, and I guess we don't have a choice of choosing all of them. Yeah, you have to choose one of the four. We have about 105 participants as we speak right now, and from around the world, but a lot of them are from the Middle East geography. Okay, so with that, I am looking to close the poll. 3 more seconds and I am closing the poll. Let's see the results there. Interesting. We have about 44% of our audience voting for transaction banking being the biggest focus area for corporate banking digitization as an agenda for them. Yeah. So with that, I would invite Maya to share his opening remarks before we jump into a panel. Maya.
Thank you, Ram. You are able to see my presentation slides?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all the participants who are joined in for this webinar. Interesting webinar, as Ram mentioned. There are practitioners who are going to share their experiences on the wholesale banking. And also thank IBS Intelligence for providing this opportunity for Infosys to be partner in this journey and also help share some of our experiences in what we are hearing on the corporate banking. So let me now start off by giving you a context in terms of what happened on the retail side. So you may be wondering, this is the corporate and wholesale banking seminar and why this person is talking about retail. I think I'm trying to now join some dots around this. So if you now look at in last 4 years, what really helped the retail banking to shape up and as well as scale on the digital transformation journey is this element. I think one slide talks a lot about what happened in the retail. And all the fintechs and the regtechs and the insurtechs, all of those companies trying to now get into the banking business. At one particular point in time, they were actually eating away almost more than 30% of the banking deposits. They were taking away almost 25% of the revenues of the banks. And when it comes to some of the areas like niche payments and as well as peer-to-peer wallet-based transactions, they were taking away almost 50% of those transactions. And it still continues. And what the way we speaking in terms of the volumes, today, if you now look at the Indian context, we conduct almost more than 2 billion transactions of retail in nature, which is in the form of a unified payment interface or UPI. And out of which, guess what? Almost more than 60% of these transactions are carried out by non-banks. These transactions are carried out by companies like Google Pay, WhatsApp, PhonePe, and the Paytm. I think that is what this phenomena that has happened in the area of retail. But is it stopped at the retail? No. If now look at in terms of how companies, we talked about the fintechs, now we are going to talk about the big techs, how they are going to now attack and as well as unbundle the banking, especially in the corporate area. So not many people know that Amazon has started offering a lot of corporate banking facilities for their customers without being a bank. Whether you want to in terms of the insuring, then there's an Amazon Protect. And if you want to now lend, there is an Amazon Lending. If you want to reload, that provides you in terms of the revolving credit for their suppliers and the vendors, there is a facility. And as well as they are into the entire element of the cash management and in terms of making sure that they take care of the end-to-end supply chain financing in their own environment, in their own network. I think it is not just stopping there. This gives you an indication in terms of they were having these plans much ahead of times. In 2004, when you go through and analyze the patents filed by Amazon, they had the patent filed for the how an account, a banking account can be opened online without a human interface, without a paper and a completely digital onboarding. And this patent was granted to them in almost 2009 after having filed in 2004. So today they have this patent, and all of us as bankers and as well as vendors who are going to talk about thinking that we do have innovation in terms of providing customers to onboard online, whether it's corporate customers or SMB customers, they do have a patent and they can invoke it anytime. Similarly, in 2012, they went ahead and had a patent for a payments being peer-to-peer payments being done using the Face ID authentication. I think it's way ahead of its time and almost 11 years ago. So those are the things that we are seeing as coming in for the corporate banking disruption. And if you now look at the same Amazon, they have now granted almost, this is the dated information, they have also almost granted $10 billion in loans to more than 20,000 businesses and as well as the SMEs. And they are not stopping there. They are trying to now challenge the banks in terms of, can you know, beat us in terms of the user experience, simplicity, and ease of doing business. So it is all three steps. So you have what is the loan amount required, what is the tenor that is required. There is a transparency in terms of how much you have to pay and how much you are going to provide as charges and fees. And all of that happens seamlessly because the customer or the supplier or the vendor is already verified from a KYC perspective. And they are not a bank, but they have now tied up backend with the banks and trying to provide these kind of loans. And this is an interesting journey that is taking place. The big techs trying to get into the corporate banking, whereas the fintechs have already engaged into the retail banking. While this is what happening in the European context, if you now look at an Indian context, so we do have almost 3 years ago, Amazon launched that they are going to give seller lending network. They're going to create a marketplace for the seller lending. And they have now tied up with the companies like Flexi Loans, which is again a company which has been funded by Amazon. And they are now targeting almost 340,000 small, medium, and as well as corporates who are their customers in the network, in the marketplace. And they are now trying to take this to a global kind of a arena. And they are easily having the access of the customers, which is in the form of the SMBs and the vendors. And they have the information in terms of their businesses. They have the connection that they are related to many other vendors and suppliers in the network. So they're able to now leverage this and entire approval process. More important part is the entire approval process. They have a SLA should not take more than 2 to 3 days. So this is where one of the advantage. Plus, for the SMBs and as well as the businesses, they are going to lend it at much lesser than the market rate because they don't have an infrastructure investment, branch network, and things like that. Everything is digitized. They are offering almost 150 to 250 basis points lesser than the market rate, which is a very attractive terms and conditions for the SMBs who are looking at this kind of a facility. So this is where we are seeing the disruptions coming into picture in the corporate banking. So at the same time, COVID has not left anybody. It is taken toll in terms of every businesses, and most impacted were the SMBs and the corporates, the corporate banking and the corporate banks. All of them have got really affected because of this COVID. So first and foremost, even pre-COVID, there was a lot of pressure on the revenue growth rate, and that is going to now increase because of the post-COVID in terms of the economies are shrinking. And as per the estimation, there are almost 5.2% drop in the global GDP, which is going to now impact on a continuous basis for almost banks, depending on the region, anywhere between 5 to 20% decline in the revenues. And this necessitates banks to now look out for new ways of new sources of income, especially when it comes to corporate banking. Secondly, there has been already an indication of shrinking profitability. And we have seen this in many countries where there is a negative interest rate taking place, and as well as the increasing non-performing asset portfolio. And there is a lot of changes that are taking place in the asset portfolio of the banks. This is the first time a pandemic and a crisis, which has not only brought in a liquidity risk, along with that, it also brought in a solvency risk. So solvency risk coupled with the liquidity risk is going to be very, very impactful for the banks going forward. And this is going to be playing out much more in the business banking and as well as the corporate banking and the wholesale banking as we witness. And in fact, if you analyze in your region, today's results of some of the banks, they have taken on the largest losses in their history of existence. I think this is going to continue for a few more years until they are now looking at a business model reimagination, because the way the business have been conducted, it is not going to help them in terms of looking at generating more and more revenues and improving the profitability. This comprehensively requires for them to look at a business model reimagination. Then the last one is pre-COVID, many of the banks were struggling to have a digital journey, and they were having some amount of prioritization and they are postponing. Some of them are having 3 to 5 years horizon for them to transform into digital. But what this pandemic has done is it is not only advanced the journey, but at a scale. Many of the banks have to now do this digital transformation at a scale and much faster pace than they expected. What used to take 3 to 5 years, they have expected it to be done in next 6 to 12 months kind of a time frame. And this journey is also brought in that the banks have to now look at API first, then more importantly, in terms of educating their relationship manager, because there is no face-to-face conversation. Most of the conversations are happening digitally and virtually, and how to make sure that you, with the insights that you have on the customer, offer them the right product in the right price at the right channel in the right time. I think this is going to be the challenge for them. And post-COVID, the banks are now expected to look at the digital first journeys, whether it is in the form of an onboarding of a customer, or selling a new product, or engaging with the existing customers, and more importantly, how to service the customers that you already sold the products. I think all of that is going to be changing to digital. This is the journey that corporate banks and the wholesale banks have to look at from our own assessment. Having said that, if you now look at, is there any fundamental difference that has increased between the retail and the corporate banking? So in our own assessment, we don't see that, because the line is blurring. Except for the fact that they are dealing with the two different set of customers, most of the banks are trying to bring these two businesses together. I have just taken an example of DBS here. So if you now look at DBS in Singapore, in their home country, they have launched a marketplace. And this marketplace, while appears to be retail oriented, but it has got a lot of corporates behind it, and they are trying to link the corporates and as well as the retail together in a one business model, which is the reimagination of having a business model for the platforms. Why is this bank looking at platform as a business model for them to increase the revenue and as well as increase the profitability? If you now look at globally, almost 9 out of the top 10 most valued S&P companies, that is Standard & Poor companies globally, they're all platform companies. Similarly, if you now look at out of the 295 companies which are called as unicorns globally, and almost 60% of them are platform companies. And where we come from, Asia, if you now look at almost 31 out of the 39 unicorn companies are platform companies, and where we come from, India, almost 8 out of the 9 unicorn companies in India, they're all platform companies. So there is a need for banks to move away from the pipeline business to a platform business, because that is where you have valuation being increased for the investors. That is where you provide more services for your customers. That is where you bring in a new business model for you to be now not only sustaining, but also going forward, increasing your market share by providing the marketplace. And this is exactly what DBS has done. And if you ask them what is their competition, they don't talk about the competition or competing with the banks. They say they want to be the D in the Gandalf. So that is the challenge that we have. So similarly, if you now look at, while I spoke about what Amazon is doing to banks, so some of the banks are trying to do the reverse for the Amazon. So they said that if Amazon is trying to get into banking, let's now go and get into artificial intelligence. So this is where the Goldman Sachs as a company, they have gone ahead and hired the Amazon's lead artificial intelligence in charge. So they want to now look at in terms of how can they now mix the technology and the latest technology into becoming more relevant in the marketplace. And it is not stopping just there. If you now look at the JP Morgan, they have gone ahead one step. They have got in the professor of Carnegie Mellon, whose new artificial intelligence role, to make sure that they get into the banking in a much more intelligent way. And this is an inside job profile or a job posting of a Goldman Sachs. If you now look at, almost 50% of the job openings are in technology, but it's a bank. Banking operations are all on the left-hand side, because that is where you can get the domain expertise, but building the technology which is going to help you in terms of creating a marketplace. So that is where the internal job posting is reflecting, and way of banking is going to change is coming up. So in our own assessment, what we feel is the evolving business model for the banks are going to be like this. They have to have, while they have been in existence on the left-hand side, we believe that they are going to be making more and more business on the right-hand side, which is going to be an API-led business distribution and bringing the ecosystem together, making the fintechs as partners and creating a financial services marketplace in the middle, and all of them happening over a API environment. And this helps banks to not only offer their own products, but bring in the products from the non-financial and as well as partners and the competition perspective together. So this is the business banking reimagination that we are talking about. So the corporate banks have to now look at digitizing the core to largest extent, and it has to be an API-driven corporate connectivity so that you don't have to have the person-to-person connections, and redesigning the channel experiences for the customers, because you can't expect them to come and visit the branches. And more importantly, looking at empowering your relationship managers with the digital tools so that they are up to date and relevant and contextual to the customer expectation. And all the information that the banks have stored today for so many years, that is the time for them to now look at in terms of insights-driven tailored offerings for the better engagement, and more importantly, looking at ecosystem-driven propositions so that it is no more in isolation. You can compete in the market. You have to collaborate together with the right kind of partners to bring things together. So this is what we wanted to talk about with an example, how it has happened in the Indian context. All of these banks are competing on a day-to-day basis in India, but they have come together, formed a consortium to offer a comprehensive reimagined trade finance transaction journey on distributed ledger technology. And all of these banks have now started a different entity. This is the reimagining of the business model, a different entity by funding them, having a legal entity formation so that they want to make it big. So similarly, we have seen Asia's first neobank, which is providing capabilities for SMBs and as well as startups. This is in openbank.co, supported by ICICI Bank. This provides all the aspects that a SMB requires, starting from the onboarding, going up to the servicing, completely in a digitized environment. This is the journey that we are looking at. And all of these things that I spoke about are happening on the cloud environment. And these experiences can be taken into many other countries and many other regions seamlessly. And these are the learnings that we have seen in the last few quarters. So I think I have taken more time. I'll pause here and I'll hand it over back to Ram.
Thank you, Maya. Evolving business models, API-led business distribution. I think we need to get more and more familiar with these terminologies as we move into the new era, I guess. Time for a quick audience poll, and then we'll jump into a very fascinating conversation we're going to have with the two gentlemen representing, senior leadership positions at banks. But before we jump into that, here is the next question, the next poll for the audience. Since this discussion is about the cloud, I guess to set the tone on what the audience believes about cloud adoption, do we believe that cloud adoption for corporate banking technology is most likely to be not conducive because it's difficult? Is it driven by regulatory restrictions? Is it likely to be on private cloud only? Or do we believe as an audience that it's going to be both on private and public and widely adopted? On last count, we have 145 attendees. We did have a lot of new signups in the last 15 minutes. And I do want to give them 30 seconds more to poll. In the meanwhile, I guess, what is very interesting, Maya, in the conversation in what you updated, you said banks need to move away from pipeline to platform business. And that was, I think, a very powerful statement talking about unicorns and what we're getting to experience here.
Thanks, Ram. I think that is happening as we see.
Interesting. And I guess there was a discussion we had about consortiums and distributed ledger and trade finance, and I would pick on that with my eminent panelists. But before we jump into that, I want to end this poll. So let's see what the poll results are. And I share the results there. Wow, that's interesting. Excepting 1%, nobody believes that it is difficult to adopt cloud. That's a good news of this whole discussion. But I guess it's interesting to see that the regulatory context is something that is looming large in people's minds. But notwithstanding that, you do see that almost a similar number of people believe that cloud is likely to be widely adopted both on private and public cloud. So thank you, everyone on the audience, to have shared your thoughts on that. So with that, I would move on to my next session, next part of this discussion today. So I guess it's going to be hard to start the discussion without a reference to COVID. So if I may ask, Manish, what your take has been on the digitization agenda and how it has possibly been accelerated, the post-COVID-19 era. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ram. And Maya, thanks for a very fascinating summary of the way the world is changing and especially the banking is changing. Yeah, I think regarding COVID has been actually a pretty shocker for everybody. It actually led to social distancing, country lockouts happening. But that also led to actually adoption of technology, and digital transformation. Working from home, schooling from home, online shopping, actually led to a sharp increase in people imbibing technology across all ages. Now, this forced adoption also led to people who were fearful of security and online, those fears actually ebbing down. While they have not abated completely, but that that change has led to a big surge in data adoption. Now, if I link that to actually banking, this forced adoption made people also realize what comfort and convenience you can actually do to have account onboarded online, or maybe a transaction remittance happening online, sitting at home or sitting in your office desk by doing it. Actually, those advantages has helped banks also strengthen their focus on the digital agenda. Now, I was reading one of the maybe a bit dated report a few months back on McKinsey research, which actually compared the average share of customer interaction through the digital channel as on December 19 was around 36%. And the rough data for them as per December 20 is jumped to 58%. And they believe that this jump is actually equal to a 3 years growth rate put into one. So what we are saying is COVID-19 actually has accelerated digital agenda, both for imbibing technology by individuals and more so for corporates. And this has also actually helped the banks, and as rightly Amaya mentioned, to use this opportunity to partner, collaborate with fintechs using various options of cloud or using various options of collaboration, so that you can actually create a much more convenient value-added experience to the client, such a way it becomes cost-effective as well as value accretive to the individuals.
Thank you, Manish. I think that was well articulated. I guess the collaborative part is indeed going to be the key here. And talking about, from a bank standpoint, and Raju, maybe I'll ask you your thoughts on, how does when banks look at digitization, right? I mean, there are different aspects to it. I mean, there is the customer facing sales function, there is the services function, and then we have the operations function. How does one determine what to prioritize, and how does one sequence, the whole digitization agenda from a corporate banking standpoint?
Okay. See, one thing that Corona, I think, has taught various companies across various industries and sectors is that you really need to run a very thin cost architecture if you want to succeed. And if you want to succeed under different conditions, if you can handle surprises like Corona, if you can handle disruption, you need to run a really low cost infrastructure. Now, if you want to run a low cost infrastructure, you really have no choice but to provide solutions through technology. Okay? Because only through technology can you actually provide a standardized customer experience to various customers. And by getting onto the cloud, you can convert your capital expenditure model into an operating expenditure model. Okay? And you can do scaling up much faster on the cloud than you would do otherwise. So if you have to build a really low cost architecture, which has become the need for many, many companies, because many of the companies who had a fairly high cost architecture have either packed up or are in deep trouble and require bailouts. So most of the companies nowadays are trying to remove significant cost from their overall fulfillment piece, fulfillment of transactions. And as business grows, you really want to have a very good technology platform. So if you have to do that, then you have no choice but to make investments in technology and try to service all the customers to provide a standardized customer experience. So I feel that as you go forward, this is going to be the way of life. Okay, so most of the companies are now driving towards, and cloud is something that is going to be inevitable. Okay, so all the concerns that it's not secure enough and what will happen to my customer data and that it won't pass compliance, all these basic concerns have been put to rest. Okay, and if you see FINRA, the US financial watchdog, has already cleared the cloud transactions. British Bankers Association in 2017 cleared these transactions. And recently, in August 2019, Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is supposed to be a very tough authority, has also cleared cloud transactions. So I think the broad concerns on cloud have gone away. And you know that most of the companies are moving to a cloud-based solution. It's only a matter of time, and all the legacy systems sooner or later will have to move to the cloud, and this is the way of the future. And therefore, I feel that it's not a question of if we move to cloud. I think it's a question of when, and of course, it's difficult because you know it requires a lot of work, but it's going to happen at some point in time.
Pretty interesting, Raju. It's just not whether and it's about when, right? I mean, and cloud is, you're seeing it to be pivotal to drive the cost structures, and there's no prices for guessing keeping costs down. But I guess the challenge will also be from a customer's angle, and I'll probably go back to Manish. And Manish, you've seen corporate banking evolve over the last many years, and you've seen it across geographies, right? So if I was to ask you, what are the changing expectations from a customer standpoint, from what it has been over the years to what you're seeing now and what you're expecting to see going forward? How would you visualize it, Manish?
See, I think I will maybe start alluding to one of the slides what Maya mentioned, that the lines between actually what the retail and corporates are actually doing is getting blurred. And that's a base which becomes in because the fintech revolution during later part of the last decade actually has led to increasing customer expectations in a significant way, which has also led to actually raising the bar for banks to perform in a big way. Now, if I look from a corporate perspective, which is where we talked about how do you evolve as from a pipeline to a platform. Now, I would ideally put into three buckets. The first part is, I would say, for a corporate bank to be successful, and if you need the change happening, they need to actually meet a principle of SATS, I personally call it, which is SATS. Okay, S stands for speed, A for accuracy, T for transparency, and S for actually secure environment. And this is the same framework which applies actually to retail. So the corporate customer also using to the fintech also has the same expectation. So all corporate transactions also need to pass through that SATS benchmark coming in. So transparency and accuracy is actually now given for granted. And that's the reason why banks have to ensure they have a robust infrastructure behind it. I think the second point I will link into will be actually how can the banks be the growth partners? Now, what do you mean by growth partners? Now, because of COVID, a lot of companies have been actually struggling in terms of actually ramping up their businesses. Now, can banks be a growth partner in actually helping them provide capital? It's not about lending money. It's also about what Raju mentioned about how do you make them efficient by providing cost-effective services. By using our systems, can we actually give them forecasting tools for liquidity so that we can reduce their working capital overall? Can we actually now, the concept of platform now? Earlier, we used to talk about, I'm dealing with a large company that is sufficient to meet their working capital requirement. But imbibing the platform concept is a concept moving from financing the company to financing the ecosystem of the company. So they are saying that you be a growth partner for me, help me be competitive to stand in the market by supporting me sustain and excel. And which will happen, how do you, in an ecosystem way, finance the client, the vendor, and their dealers. And I think the last part I will put will be the trust advisors. See, the banks are also investing, and there are a lot of tools available, which is AI, we talk about machine learning, robotics, all those tools available. And with loads of historical data available, banks will have a lot of insights in how the companies should change or adopt. Now, which companies may not have the capability or financial muscle to do that. Now, can banks become the trusted advisors to share those insights so that it can actually nudge the companies in making the right transformation while the digital agenda across the ecosystem is changing?
Interesting.
So I would basically sum it up by 3 parts. Does the bank offering need the SATS principle? Does it actually, can you be a growth partner for your client and think beyond only client to expand to the ecosystem part? And can you be a trusted advisor by the technology which is available to you, how you leverage it to basically value add to the client and help them leapfrog into actually creating a differentiated competitive advantage?
Very useful, Manish. I'm sure the audience listening to this would actually gain a lot from those insights. Yeah, very, very fascinating. Thank you. And I guess the point that was also being made is about a lot of discussion is about the ecosystem. And I know, Raju, you are particularly passionate about the drive of, for example, using technology such as blockchain or distributed ledger, which even Maya talked about, on how that is actually has the potential to change the landscape of corporate banking and digitization. A few words on that, Raju.
Yeah. See, international trade is a 16 trillion per year market. So it's a fairly large opportunity. Okay. Out of that, 75% of goods are transferred either through shipping containers or road transport. Okay. And around 25% of that 16 trillion is basically commodities. Some roughly approximately 40% of the 25% is energy and energy related, oil and its derivatives, oil, gas, and so on. Some 30% is industrial and industrial bases and derivatives, raw materials, and so on. And remaining 30% is agricultural produce. Now, if you take a look at a trade transaction today, it is very messy. Okay, so if you imagine an Indonesian trader or an SME trying to import, let's say, food grains from Nigeria, just for example, okay, then you see the grains have to move from the warehouse through a trucking company to the port, okay, and then you have to go through customs, then you have to load it onto a shipping company, then the same thing on the other side, you have to clear the customs, then you have to go through a trucking company, go to warehouse, and so on and so forth. And then the payment mechanics in which the customer has to open an LC, okay, and then the Nigerian company may not trust the Indonesian bank, so it has to be confirmed by a credit enhancement, a bank in another country, okay. So if you see this whole transaction, it's so messy that it takes around 3 months, sometimes 6 months lead time to perform this transaction. And it's very document oriented. So each of these companies have their own documents that you need to fill. And obviously, many of them are sitting on legacy systems. So it's all paper-based. And when it's paper-based, it's prone to fraud, mistakes, amendments, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is what that happens. And plus, if you throw in the KYC AML risk where the ship stops at a high-risk country and there's a transshipment risk of what is being loaded and what is being taken out, if you throw all this in, it becomes kind of a very messy transaction. But the way of the modern world is when you hear the word messy, you also hear the word opportunity. Okay. Because the more messy it is, the better chance for you to disrupt this and to create something. So blockchain has come out as one of the solutions to it, although it has taken a long time. I mean, we are hearing the word blockchain for the last 2.5, 3 years, and it has not yet attained scale. Okay. So there are several companies trying to offer a solution. So there's a company called R3, which has a platform called Corda, okay? And it's doing a pilot called Voltron with multiple banks and several counterparties. Then you have TradeIX, it's also another company. Then you have IBM you have Ethereum, then you have Reuters doing something, Swift doing something. You have a company called Circle, which is in pay-to-pay. And finally, maybe most notably, you have a company called DLT Ledgers, which is run out of Singapore, okay, and claims to have a plug and play kind of a solution and has already done $3 billion worth of transactions. But still, it has not really come to a point where, of course, it's on a cloud for scalability, okay? But because for it to work, all these participants, the importer, the importing bank, the exporter, the exporting bank, the shipping company, the customs, all have to be on a unified system. And I think blockchain tries to provide a solution for this. And if they manage to crack it, it's possibly going to be one of the most efficient solutions. So as you know, blockchain is just a database. It's just a different kind of database where you hold data in small blocks, and then it's immutable. Basically, whatever you put in, it's irreversible in that sense. And then all these blocks are chained together. Okay, so effectively, it allows you the possibility of a distributed ledger. Okay, and as we know, distributed processing and distributed ledger has its own advantages. Okay, that means it will create transparency, it will create effectiveness, and maybe it will reduce the time. But what I'm saying is the market opportunity is so large that it's worth investing in getting these transactions to move faster. I mean, in today's world, if you want to order wheat from a country and it takes 3 months, in a world where turnaround times are becoming faster and faster. Okay, so for example, when you do your mobile banking as a retail customer, you are used to doing everything real time online. Okay, I mean, you transfer money and you are expecting to receive an SMS not in a fast manner, but in an instant manner now, immediately. Okay, so it is the same set of people who run the corporate bank. So they do their retail banking, then they also are CFOs in their other hat, and they're doing the corporate banking. So their expectation of how fast transactions should move is the same. And for you to be able to build that kind of real-time, online, instant gratification is what the world is moving towards. Okay, so if I go to internet and I try to load on a page, if it doesn't load, I get irritated and I move on to another page actually, okay? I can't wait. So the customer expectation in terms of how fast you would do a transaction is no longer thinking about a few hours. The customer has to do the transaction instantly, now, and need a confirmation immediately. But this is possible only when you really invest in technology and deliver that kind of a, the AI, basically without AI, it's quite impossible to do that. Because if you build some business rules, you can take care of 70% of the transaction. But without AI, how do you take care of the remaining 30% of the cases where a human being could have exercised his or her intelligence to pass the transaction? Okay, and unless the system is learning that, okay, through a process of machine learning and some AI rules come in, then otherwise it will constantly go to human eyes for processing the transaction. Then you will not be able to deliver instant online real-time gratification. So I think we all are moving towards that, and hopefully some companies will move faster than others, okay? But it's a unidirectional move. Basically, everyone has no choice but to go there as the customer's expectations are changing.
Very interesting. Instant, real-time gratification. I guess these words are going to be etched, for us to remember for a long time, because that is indeed the mantra, talking about digitization. And before we jump into the next section of our webinar today, a very related question to you, Manish. And we're talking about getting our customers to be embracing this, right? But we know that every technology change comes along with the challenge of change management. We've experienced it inside our organizations, and managing change within the bank is one thing. But when you actually get your customers to embrace, the digitization journey along with you, you have any thoughts, experiences to share, or, pieces of information that you would find our audience to be lapping at on how do you drive this change and manage this change with the customers here?
Yeah, see, as we all discussed as I said, that digital transformation is essential to survive. Okay, but yet digital transformation is actually not always successful. And I think the key gap I see is primarily mindset. And it's an organization mindset. How do you align the organization mindset to the client mindset? And the key part comes in. So when we talk about what digital agenda or journey I'm talking about, I think the first starts with what's the purpose of it. And when I say a purpose of it, in the earlier days, I used to say, what's my business strategy and who's my client segment? Now, in today's time, I talk about what's my business strategy, what's the type of client experience I want. And coupled with that has to be now IT strategy, because without that, a purpose cannot be defined, because each individual, the words Raju mentioned was instant gratification and all. So you need to actually keep in mind the satisfying each individual wants to have a personal satisfaction experience coming in. And that can be achieved in the scale through using the mapping the IT infrastructure strategy along with your purpose. Of course, the second part will be the way you do it, whether you collaborate, whether you invest, whether you do the fintech part collaboration, but key is the discipline for execution. And I think the last part, what you maybe mentioned, Ram, not the least, will be people. How do you actually up to your people so that they can be your ambassadors for driving that change? So one of the key components of having a successful digital transformation. So as we invest in this technology and doing this, a lot of roles in the banking or businesses may not be actually need to be redefined. The expectations from them will be different. So a successful digital transformation, I think, can be achieved only with employee transformation journeys inbuilt in that path. Whether it's talking about two parts, and both skills have to be taken, whether it's an IQ skill on the updating on the technology and the new products coming in, but more part is on the EQ part, because the serviceness has to remain very strong. Now, Maya quoted about 2004 patent of Amazon. Now, if I look at Bill Gates in 94, he mentioned about banks may not be required, but banking will be. Okay, we're talking about 94. So in a sense, we are talking about how do we ingrain the mindset such a way we are service oriented to help people actually or clients achieve the success in their respective businesses. And that will come with aligning organization mindset, people mindset with the client mindset.
Lovely. Yeah. Banking will remain, banks may not. So there's a reason why I guess we are going through this change right now, and I guess mindsets makes.
And what about bankers, Manish? When bank and banking is all right, but what will happen to bankers?
Yeah, that's where I think we all have to change the mindset that the bankers also will get redefined on the roles they do, right?
So the
There will
punch.
be a lot of banking careers, but very less career bankers.
Well, while we debate on that, I am going to actually invite our audience to poll their views on the third question for the day before we jump into the next section. And here is the question, right? So, will digital adoption in corporate banking be dependent or driven by awareness with corporate clients, early realization of cost efficiency benefits, an ecosystem integration? I guess a lot of that has been spoken about today. Or is it improved customer experience? I don't think any of them are unimportant, or it doesn't mean that it's any less important than the others, but we're just picking what is most important. Yeah. So while we are having this poll on, I would encourage audience who have questions, please post them on the Q&A section. It may be hard for us to let you speak. So instead of raising your hand, you may want to actually put the question in the Q&A section. We would do our best to answer them in the next 10 minutes we have. And if we can't answer them, we would make sure that they are, we subsequently get the answers and you can be in touch with us independently. Yeah. So with that, I am closing the poll, and let's see what the results are, wow, that's an overwhelming majority that believes that the digital adoption is going to be a function of the ecosystem integration between banks and fintechs, right? I mean, that's very interesting. Thank you, everyone in the audience to our poll. We have more than 151 people now, listening to us with rapt attention. Thank you, everyone, for being on this webinar. So I'll now open up the next section. I think there are some questions. So Maya, you've not spoken for a while. So here's a question for you from Rajendra Kumar. And this question is, what are the major challenges to implement DLT in banking industry?
See, if you now look at the evolution of DLT, the distributed ledger technologies, two and a half years back, there were, of course, there were a lot of hesitation in terms of the new technology. Unlike in the past, many other technologies were experimented by other industries, and banking was a laggard to experiment that, whether it's in internet or mobile or cloud or things like that. But fortunately, the blockchain or the DLT was the first technology where banking and financial verticals tested and experimented much before any other industry. So like that, we have one leg up. So considering that we have started the journey, the concerns that initially saw is no more a concern now, because initially there was regulatory hesitation and regulatory acceptance and things like that. But now we see that regulators themselves are now looking at using blockchain or DLT to issue digital currencies going forward. And many countries are in that journey. And we also seen circulars and the guidance notes coming from the regulators like Monetary Authority of Singapore, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, or Bank of England, and things like that. So we have seen more and more acceptance from the regulators, which used to be a concern earlier. And the last one that I wanted to highlight is in terms of the cost benefit analysis, whether it is going to be successful technology or it's going to be a wasted investment. I think that is the concern that most of the banks have had. And even whatever they did, they stopped at the center of excellences or POCs or pilots being conducted, but not many banks tried to take it to the market in a full-fledged production way. But slowly, we are seeing that adoption is coming into picture. So it is no more residing in the pilot or a POC or a center of excellence stage. We see that many of them are getting into production environment. In our own customer base, we have seen some of them have started already using this in a much more comprehensive way. And this also provided them an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to reimagine the business model. Now, many of these banks are trying to offer payment as a service on blockchain to smaller banks, trade as a service on blockchain to smaller institutions. So it has given them an opportunity to relook at and reimagine the business model so that they can generate the platform-based revenues, subscription-based revenues, so that they also become a company which can be valued much more than a normal bank.
Thank you, Maya. I guess reimagining the business model seems to be if there was another title for this webinar, I guess that's what we would choose. I guess a lot of that is interesting. Raju, there are a couple of questions that are related, so I'm going to just combine them and pose it to you. There's a question from Tariq Madani and also from Milan Gosalia, which is about how do you drive, what are the areas to focus on as you do customer onboarding, and also keeping in mind data quality and regulation in context.
See, I've been working for 30 plus years, okay? It seems like a long time now, but we have moved from, when I joined, a lot of people used to call IT a back office, okay, back office function. After a few years, they would call it an enabler, yeah, enabler. Now we have come to a position where IT is possibly your competitive advantage, okay? It's no longer somewhere in the back office. It is not, basically, IT is what your competitive advantage is. You can do what your IT can do, okay? And if you've been slow in investing in, then basically you lose out when it comes to competitive advantage, okay? So when it comes to onboarding the customer, we had this old process where the customer comes in, then you ask him a few questions, then you ask him for a paper documentation and so on. You must have seen that in many other parts of the world, actually the account opening and onboarding is happening merely by a handheld device, actually, okay? The customer doesn't even have to be physically coming in. So you're already integrated with all the databases for doing a know your customer, anti-money laundering. So all these databases are online integrated with your devices. Okay? So after the customer has given you the basic documents, which can be directly uploaded or even pulled from different governmental agencies if they permit. Okay. So for example, in the Middle East, Dubai allows you to read the chip on the UAE ID card. Okay. And through an approved vendor, and apart from 2 or 3 fields that are blocked, you can read the information that is on the chip. And then you can pull the information from the KYC AML databases that already exist in your bank, and you straight away onboard the customer immediately. Okay. And so you're doing all these checks. Now, if the customer chooses to walk into the branch, that is fine. I mean, you can do a visual check, but what I'm trying to say is that increasingly we are moving towards an onboarding instantly and generating an account number for the customer so that the business can start. Okay. And I've seen several banks advertising this, and also in Middle East, okay, where even if the customer walks into the branch, okay, you fill in all the data, then you give a handheld device. I mean, it could be an iPad or something on which the customer verifies the information and just says, I agree or something, which is now in some countries, you may still need a wet signature. Okay. So you will notice that maybe at the time of onboarding the customer, you do take the first time a wet signature, even though electronic law has been passed and electronic signature is okay. But I think when you go to the court in case of some dispute, some courts still being rooted in the past traditional practices look for a wet signature. So some of the banks are taking a wet signature, but otherwise it's all moved online.
And it's a matter of time, I guess, Raju, before it actually moves. You know, even courts and the legal system catches up with the.
See, the thing is, you know, if you have done 1 or 2 core banking conversions, one thing you learn is not to do it again in your lifetime. Okay. Because you would have sat late nights and reconciled the balances so many times that you think, let somebody else do it. This is something that I would rather not do. But unfortunately, whosoever has this attitude, it will come and bite you. Because as you know, unless you have a proper core banking platform, okay, and if you don't get out of those legacy platforms, a lot of things that you want to do, like an online onboarding, okay, and several other things, you will not be able to do because you are stuck with old legacy systems. So what I'm saying is you have come to a point where you really have to move fast and do these, even if it means a lot of pain and it takes a lot of pain to transform your systems. Because if you don't do it, then you'll be left behind compared to competition.
Oh, well said, Raju. I can't agree more with you. And I think that's the need of the hour. And I guess we have a very interesting question from Ashish Gokhale, and Manish, I may invite you to answer this. The question is this: are banks looking at digitization for their own benefit or also looking to pass them to their customers? I guess, he has a point of view, looks like, very evidently. And the question is, most importantly, for SMEs who find it so difficult to access credit and banking facilities. Manish.
Yeah, I think when we actually need to succeed, it's like a marriage, and you cannot have a marriage with 2 consenting couples. So I don't think a bank can actually build a sustainable business without equal mutual sharing benefit available with the client, because let's understand, it's a buyer's market with a lot of banks competing, along with actually services being offered by even fintech companies. So for us to do that, you need to strengthen the bond. And that's the reason we talked about how do you invest in employees itself so that they can actually become from an RM to a trusted advisor and work along with the client. So I think, so part A of the question, I think it has to be a mutual benefit to be actually shared equally well. And that's how sometimes you get slightly more, sometimes some other, but it has to be mutual one. The second part is from the SME. And I think the traditional way of working is that you look at SME and try to finance them on their own balance sheet, or give them actually a money against the collateral. That's the conventional way of thinking. Now, which is a concept moving in from a traditional banking to ecosystem banking. So if you look at a large company, assuming they have around 50 of their dealers and say 10 of their suppliers, assuming 15 of them out of this 60 odd people are actually SMEs. If somebody who knows the parent company, the large company which deals with them well, then to the extent of sales and purchase from them, you can actually set up, and these are automated limits you can set up in systems based on the cash flow change. So to the extent of the business you are doing it from the parent company or the large company to the small SME, you can set up auto limits available. So I think apart from standalone limit being given to an SME which they struggle for, if they get a large order linked to a strong large company, the ecosystem financing is anyway trying to work towards overcoming these odds. Now, what is the advantage of this? And this goes back to the question number one, who gains? So assuming now banking parlance, if SME on a standalone basis is borrowing at say 9 to 10%, if I work along with a double A rated company and I know they have been dealing for last 30 years, that's a transaction track record I have, I don't mind giving them at 8%. So it's a 2% advantage available, and there is a financing available, interest advantage available. And as a bank, how I have gained is not because 2% I have reduced. I have actually minimized my risk of insolvency by ensuring I'm financing a credible supply chain of a client.
Very well articulated, Manish. I think it's a perspective that you get to see from, right? Unfortunately, we run out of time. I think we already have passed the deadline, but I do find one question that is quite fascinating, and I'm going to pose it to any of the panelists who may want to answer this. And the question is from Abhishek Ashish. I love your question, Abhishek. Question is this: as Maya mentioned, that Amazon, is moving from non-banking to banking business model without being a bank. Do you think that a bank can also enter into non-banking business? Anyone in the panel, please.
I will take Ram. Abhishek, I think it's a very interesting question. And we're already seeing that many of the banks globally are trying to get into non-banking. When I say non-banking, it is not just borrowing, lending, and payments, but they're facilitating a lot of services in a platform way. So like I mentioned, the DBS case in the Singapore, so they have created marketplace for people who want to buy and sell second-hand car. Banking has got nothing to do with that. They have facilitated for people to select travel. So they have tied up with Singapore Airlines and also some 100+ hotels around the world, and they provide you the packages. So there's nothing, no banking, there's no lending, there's no borrowing. Similarly, they have created a marketplace for electricity. That means in Singapore, there are many electricity providers. So you as a customer, a consumer, you can select based on the dimension and the requirement of your house. Go and select whichever electricity provider that you want, and they will facilitate that. Similarly, they have also provided a marketplace for telcos. That means if you want a landline or a fixed line or a VoIP, or you just want internet or a wireless, so or a Wi-Fi, so you can go and select that. So based on the plan, you will be able to do it. So there is no banking in between. It is between service provider and service seeker. They're coming into big picture. So there is a non-banking activity. But by doing that, they're able to create a lot of interest and a lot of customers onboarded. And for example, when you're traveling, after all your traveling requirements, ticket booking, hotel booking, everything happens. So there is a choice for you to look at whether you want a travel insurance. That's when banking comes into picture. Similarly, they have provided a portal or a marketplace for home buying and home renting. You can either sell your home or you can buy your home or rent it out. Again, there is no banking until you come to the last point where he says that whether you want to fund this by having a home loan. So those kind of things comes into picture. So many banks have started it. Similarly, in India, you have banks offering movie ticket buying, train ticket buying, bus ticket buying, or paying your electricity bill and utilities bill and things like that. Have nothing to do with banking. So there is a movement that is happening, moving towards non-banking activities. There is regulatory wise, there is no restrictions. I think it is all left to the banks to look at reimagining the business model so that they're relevant and contextual in the next century.
Yeah. So let me add something to this. Okay. So we should wonder how come every single industry has got disrupted. Banks have not got disrupted till now. Okay. There must be a reason to that. Okay. So while fintechs are very fleet-footed, they're very smart, and they do transactions like buying, a train ticket or buying a ticket, they have largely been focusing on transactions. Okay. And, one of the primary responsibilities of the bank is that when the money is coming in of the customers through deposits, you have to ensure that the money is clean. It is not drug money. Okay. It is not terrorist funding and so on. So there is a huge infrastructure which actually checks the cleanliness of the money, which is the KYC and AML. On top of that, every time a customer makes a transaction, since they tend to be sizable transactions, you have to check that there is no terrorist funding here and it's not a suspicious transactions. And as you may be aware, that the money laundering and KYC the people who do it have become really, really smart. Okay. And they do something that is called layering. And because of the layering, it becomes extremely hard for you to detect that it's actually a money laundering transaction. For example, the latest one that happened in South Africa is over invoicing that was happening on the back of a used car business. Okay. So there was a slight increase in the invoicing of the used car. It's very hard to figure out. Okay. And the banks have invested a lot of systems, technology to make sure that every single transaction that is going out is clean. Okay. Now, yes, if I want to send some $10 to you, I don't have to check all this. And if you want to buy a cinema ticket, of course, you don't have to check this and so on and so forth. If you're paying an electricity bill, you don't have to. But if you want to get into the full scale banking where large transactions and trade transactions take place, you will have no choice but to check all these things. And once you check, then it's not whether Amazon will start doing banking activities. If Amazon checks all this, it's a proxy banking license for Amazon to do banking. Okay. And welcome to the club. Okay. Then they will end up being as detailed and as complicated. When we say we are talking about an Infosys system or something, and it takes a long time to implement, is because you are trying to take care of all these complexities. Now, several fintechs have come to us and they said, you know what, the customers want to make a payment. I will send it electronically to you and you release the payment. And I tell them, sure, I'll do all the difficult work of checking the customer and cleanliness, and you will pick it up electronically. Okay. And you just do the transaction and you are the great innovator. Okay. So guess what? The banks also have understood. Okay. And if you go to banks' websites, you will see that the bank's mobile banking platform can do wonderful things. It can also make donations to temples and churches. It can do all the transactions. You can buy insurance from it. You can buy mutual funds. So while it's true that banks are big monolithic structures that possibly move slower, but they are getting their act together, and you will see that they will give really tough competition to all the fintech companies. We are not going to take it lying down.
That's speaking for the banking community there, Raju. I love the passion in the closing remark. I'm sorry, but I do have to close this session. I'm apologetic that we have run by 9 minutes more than our schedule, but I'm sure everyone in the audience would agree with me that this was one of the most fascinating, insightful, and knowledge sharing sessions that we would have had in a long time. Yeah. Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Raju. And thank you, Maya, for being on this panel today. It was a wonderful session. Audience, for those questions that are not answered, please post them to us separately and we'll try our best to actually get them responded back to you. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.